The first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. As Miss Lily Ashworth slipped through the servants' entrance of Thornfield Manor, her simple muslin dress damp with morning dew. She had been walking the gardens since before sunrise, as was her custom when sleep eluded her, which had been far too often since her father's death 6 months ago. The weight of responsibility, of managing the estate's finances while her stepmother entertained suitors for her hand, had made rest a luxury she could rarely afford. What she did not expect to find in the secluded rose garden was a man kneeling among the flower beds, his hands dark with earth, his simple working clothes marking him as one of the gardeners. He looked up at her approach, and Lily felt her breath catch at the sight of his face, strong features softened by intelligence, dark eyes that held depths she longed to explore, and a smile that seemed to light the morning air. "I beg your pardon, miss," he said, rising gracefully to his feet despite his humble attire. "I did not expect to encounter anyone at this hour." His voice carried the cultured tones of education, unusual for a servant, but Lily had learned that the war had scattered many gentlemen into unexpected circumstances. "Please do not let me disturb your work," she said softly. "I often walk here in the mornings. The gardens are so peaceful at dawn." What Lily could not have known was that the man before her was no gardener at all, but Lord James Blackwood, heir to the Duke of Ravenshollow, who had been living in disguise at Thornfield Manor for the past month. He had come to assess the estate's value for a potential purchase, but had found himself drawn to the early morning solitude of the gardens, and now, unexpectedly, to the young woman who moved through them like a spirit of the dawn itself. Miss Lily Ashworth was the daughter of a country gentleman whose recent death had left her family in precarious circumstances. What she concealed beneath her reputation for quiet dignity was a sharp mind for business and a fierce determination to save her family's estate from creditors, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness to a marriage of convenience. She had no idea that the gentle stranger who tended the roses held the power to change her fate with a single word. "Stay with me until the truth can no longer remain hidden." "The roses are particularly beautiful this year," Lily said, moving closer to admire the blooms that surrounded them. "Someone has cared for them with great skill." James felt a flush of pride at her words, though he could not reveal that these gardens were his own design, implemented during his weeks of supposed employment here. "They respond well to attention," he said simply. "Like most beautiful things, they flourish when they are truly seen and appreciated." There was something in his tone that made Lily look at him more closely. His hands might be dirty with honest work, but his speech was refined, his bearing unconsciously aristocratic despite his humble clothes. "You speak as if you have experience with more than just gardening," she observed. "A man learns many things in life," James replied carefully. "Not all of them are reflected in his current circumstances." It was a diplomatic answer that revealed nothing while suggesting everything. Lily found herself intrigued by this contradiction. A man who worked with his hands but spoke like a gentleman, who tended flowers with the care of an artist, but carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. "I am Miss Ashworth," she said, extending her hand with the natural grace that marked her gentle breeding. "I live here at Thornfield." "James," he replied, taking her hand with a careful courtesy that sent warmth spiraling up her arm. "I am temporarily employed here." The hesitation in his voice suggested there was more to his story, but Lily did not press. She had learned that everyone carried secrets, and she respected the privacy of others as she hoped they would respect hers. "Do you enjoy the work?" she asked instead, genuinely curious about this man who seemed so different from the other servants. "More than I expected," James admitted, and there was surprise in his voice, as if he were discovering this truth for the first time. "There is something satisfying about creating beauty, about nurturing life. It is peaceful in a way I had not anticipated." Lily smiled at his honesty. I understand that feeling. I often come here when the world becomes too complicated, when the demands of society feel overwhelming. The gardens never judge, never demand anything but appreciation. And what demands does society make of you, Miss Ashworth? James asked, then caught himself. Forgive me, that was presumptuous. Your concerns are not my affair. Please do not apologize, Lily said quickly. It is refreshing to have someone ask about my thoughts rather than my dowry or my connections. Society demands that I marry well, that I secure my family's future through an advantageous alliance. It cares little for my own preferences in the matter. James felt a stab of something that might have been anger at the casual way she spoke of being traded like property. And do you have preferences? About marriage, I mean? The question was bold, perhaps too bold for a gardener to ask a gentleman's daughter, but something in his tone invited honesty. I suppose I am foolish enough to hope for affection, Lily admitted, her cheeks colouring slightly. I know it is impractical, given my circumstances, but I cannot help but dream of a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine feeling. That does not sound foolish at all, James said quietly. It sounds like wisdom. A marriage without affection is merely a business arrangement dressed in silk and ceremony. His words carried a weight of conviction that suggested personal experience, and Lily found herself wondering what had shaped his views on marriage. You speak as if you have given the matter considerable thought. Have I not said that a man learns many things in life? James replied with a slight smile. I have observed enough marriages to know that wealth and status provide poor foundations for happiness. They walked together along the gravel paths, their conversation flowing with an ease that surprised them both. James found himself speaking more freely than he had in years, drawn out by Lily's genuine interest and lack of artifice. She, in turn, discovered in him a mind that matched her own in intelligence and curiosity, someone who listened to her thoughts rather than merely waiting for his turn to speak. Tell me, Lily said, as they paused beside a fountain where water sparkled in the growing light, what brought you to Thornfield? You do not seem like, that is, your manner suggests, that I am not what I appear. James finished gently. You are very perceptive, Miss Ashworth. I am indeed not quite what I seem, though I cannot explain the particulars of my situation. Are you in some kind of trouble? Lily asked, concern evident in her voice. If you need help, if there is anything I can do. The offer of assistance from someone who barely knew him, someone who had no reason to trust him, touched James more deeply than he cared to admit. You are very kind, but my circumstances are complicated. I cannot involve you in my affairs. Cannot or will not? Lily challenged gently. There is a difference, you know. James looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the intelligence in her green eyes, the determined set of her chin, the way she stood as if ready to face whatever challenges the world might throw at her. She was beautiful, yes, but it was a beauty that came from within, from strength and compassion, rather than mere physical perfection. Cannot, he said finally, though I wish it were otherwise. The wistful note in his voice made Lily's heart skip a beat. There was something in his expression, in the way he looked at her, that suggested feelings he dared not voice. Perhaps someday you will be free to speak more plainly, she said softly. Perhaps, James agreed, though his tone suggested he held little hope of such freedom. They were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the gravel path. Lily turned to see her stepmother approaching, her face set in lines of disapproval that had become all too familiar. "Lily!" Mrs. Ashworth said sharply. "What are you doing out here at this hour? And who is this person?" James is one of the gardener's, stepmother," Lily replied calmly, though she could feel the tension radiating from the man beside her. "I was admiring his work with the roses." Mrs. Ashworth's gaze swept over James with the dismissive assessment of someone accustomed to viewing servants as barely human. "I see. Well, you should not be wandering about unaccompanied, speaking with persons of his station. It is most improper." "I meant no disrespect, ma'am," James said, his voice carefully neutral. though Lily could see the muscle in his jaw tighten with suppressed emotion. "I was merely answering Miss Ashworth's questions about the garden." "Yes, well, in future you will confine your answers to yes, miss, and no, miss," Mrs. Ashworth said coldly. "Lily, come inside immediately. Lord Pemberton will be calling this afternoon, and you must be properly prepared to receive him." Lily felt her heart sink at the mention of Lord Pemberton, a man old enough to be her father, whose interest in her was motivated entirely by her family's remaining assets. "Of course, stepmother," she said quietly, then turned back to James. "Thank you for the gardening advice. I hope we may continue our discussion another time." "As do I, Miss Ashworth," James replied, and the formal words carried layers of meaning that made her pulse quicken. As Lily was led away by her stepmother, James watched her go with a mixture of longing and frustration that surprised him with its intensity. In the space of a single conversation, this remarkable young woman had managed to touch something in him that he had thought safely buried beneath years of duty and obligation. But he was not free to pursue such feelings. He was here under false pretenses, living a lie that would soon be exposed when his true identity was revealed. And even if he could speak honestly about who he was, what future could there be for them? She was a gentleman's daughter, facing financial ruin, and he was heir to a dukedom with responsibilities that would never allow him to marry for love alone. Yet as he returned to his work among the roses, James found himself counting the hours until dawn would come again, when he might have another chance to see the woman who had captured his heart without even trying. That afternoon, Lily sat in the drawing room, enduring Lord Pemberton's visit with all the grace she could muster. He was not an unkind man, merely old, dull, and utterly convinced of his own importance. His conversation consisted entirely of his various properties, his political connections, and his plans for modernizing whatever estate he might acquire through marriage. "My dear Miss Ashworth," he was saying, "I believe we could make an excellent match. Your family's connections, modest though they may be, would complement my own holdings quite nicely. And of course, marriage to me would secure your future most admirably." "You are very generous, Lord Pemberton," Lily replied, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "But I confess, I'm not yet ready to consider such a significant step." "Nonsense, my dear. At your age, you cannot afford to be overly particular. Your circumstances, while regrettable, make a swift marriage quite advisable." His tone was kindly condescending, as if he were explaining simple arithmetic to a child. Lily felt her temper rise at his casual dismissal of her autonomy, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I appreciate your concern for my welfare, but I believe I'm capable of determining my own readiness for marriage." "Are you indeed?" Mrs. Ashworth interjected sharply, "because from where I sit, your determination to remain single is rapidly leading this family toward ruin. Lord Pemberton offers security, respectability, and an end to our financial difficulties. What more could you possibly want? Love, Lily thought but did not say. Respect, partnership, a meeting of minds and hearts rather than merely bank accounts. Instead, she said, "I simply ask for a little more time to consider such an important decision." "Time is a luxury we cannot afford," her stepmother replied. "The creditors grow more insistent each week, and our options grow fewer. Lord Pemberton's offer may not remain open indefinitely." "Indeed," Lord Pemberton agreed. "While I am quite taken with Miss Ashworth's charms, I do have other considerations to pursue. I would prefer to have this matter settled within the month." The casual way he spoke of their potential marriage, as if it were a business transaction to be concluded efficiently, made Lily's stomach turn. But she also understood the reality of their situation. Without her father's income, without any male relative to manage the estate, they were indeed facing financial disaster. Marriage to Lord Pemberton would solve their immediate problems, even if it condemned her to a lifetime of quiet desperation. "I understand the urgency of our situation," she said carefully. "Perhaps we might discuss the matter again next week." "Very well," Lord Pemberton said, rising from his chair. But I do hope you will give my proposal serious consideration, Miss Ashworth. I believe you will find that practical considerations must sometimes outweigh romantic notions." After he left, Lily escaped to her room, pleading a headache that was not entirely feigned. She stood at her window, looking out over the gardens, where she had spent such a pleasant morning, and found herself thinking of James. There had been something in his manner, in the way he spoke and moved, that suggested depths she longed to explore. But what future could there be with a gardener, however intelligent and attractive he might be? Yet as she prepared for bed, Lily found herself planning to rise early again, to walk in the gardens where she might encounter the mysterious man who had made her feel more alive in one conversation than Lord Pemberton had in 3 visits. She was playing a dangerous game, she knew, but for the first time in months she felt a spark of something that might have been hope. The next morning found Lily in the garden even earlier than before, her heart racing with anticipation that she tried to convince herself was merely appreciation for the peaceful morning air. She discovered James already at work, deadheading roses with the careful attention of someone who truly understood their needs. "You are an early riser, Miss Ashworth," he said, looking up with a smile that made her pulse quicken. "As are you," she replied, moving closer to watch his work. "Do you never sleep past dawn?" "I find the early hours peaceful," James said, which was true enough. What he did not say was that he had been hoping she would come, that he had been watching for her since the first hint of light in the sky. "I understand that feeling," Lily said, settling onto a nearby bench. "The world seems simpler at this hour, less complicated by the demands and expectations of others." James paused in his work, studying her face in the growing light. "You seem troubled this morning. Has something happened?" The gentle concern in his voice, the way he seemed to truly see her rather than merely looking at her, made Lily's defenses crumble slightly. "I received a proposal of marriage yesterday," she said quietly. James felt his heart clench, though he tried to keep his expression neutral. "I see. And our congratulations in order." I do not know," Lily admitted. "It is a practical match, one that would solve many of my family's problems, but I find myself reluctant to accept." "Why?" The question was out before James could stop himself, too direct for a servant to ask his employer's daughter. Lily looked at him, noting the intensity in his dark eyes, the way his hands had stilled on the roses. "Because I cannot help but hope for something more than mere practicality in marriage. Is that terribly foolish of me?" "Not foolish at all," James said firmly. "Marriage is a lifetime commitment. Surely it deserves to be based on more than financial convenience." "You speak as if you have strong opinions on the matter," Lily observed. "Have you ever been married or in love?" The personal nature of her question surprised them both, but James found himself wanting to answer honestly. "I have never been married," he said carefully. "As for love, I am beginning to understand that it is not something one can plan or control. It seems to arrive when least expected, often in the most inconvenient circumstances." There was something in his tone, in the way he looked at her as he spoke, that made Lily's breath catch. Inconvenient? When it occurs between people whose circumstances make it impossible to pursue, James said quietly. When duty and desire pull in opposite directions. They were speaking in metaphors, dancing around feelings neither dared voice directly, but the air between them crackled with unspoken understanding. "Perhaps," Lily said softly, "the heart does not always recognize the barriers that society creates. Perhaps it sees only the person, not their position." "Perhaps," James agreed, moving closer to where she sat. "But the heart, however wise it may be in matters of affection, is often foolish in matters of practicality. It can lead one to hope for things that can never be." "Can never be, or should never be?" Lily asked, echoing her question from the previous morning. "There is a difference." James was quiet for a long moment, studying her face, as if trying to memorize every detail. "In my case," he said finally, "I fear they amount to the same thing." Before Lily could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of horses approaching the manor. Through the garden gates, she could see a magnificent carriage bearing an unfamiliar coat of arms, followed by several riders in livery that spoke of great wealth and position. "Visitors," James said, his voice suddenly tense. "Perhaps you should return to the house, Miss Ashworth." "Why?" Lily asked, puzzled by his sudden urgency. "It is only a carriage." But James was already backing away, his face pale beneath his tan. I have work to attend to. Please, go inside." His obvious distress confused and concerned her. "James, what is wrong? You look as if you have seen a ghost." "Something like that," he muttered, then caught himself. "Forgive me, Miss Ashworth, I'm not feeling quite myself this morning." Before Lily could press him further, her stepmother's voice rang out across the garden. "Lily, come inside immediately. We have most distinguished visitors." "Udel." With a last puzzled look at James, who had already turned away and was walking quickly toward the gardener's shed, Lily made her way back to the house. In the front hall, she found her stepmother in a state of high excitement, adjusting her appearance in the mirror while the butler announced their guests. "His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshollow, and Lord Blackwood," the butler intoned. Lily felt her heart skip a beat. The Duke of Ravenshollow was one of the most powerful men in England, his wealth and influence legendary. What could possibly bring him to their modest estate? The Duke proved to be a man in his 60s, distinguished and imposing, with keen eyes that seemed to assess everything they fell upon. Beside him stood a younger man, who bore a strong family resemblance, presumably his son and heir, Lord Blackwood. "Your Grace," Mrs. Ashworth said, sinking into a deep curtsy. "What an unexpected honor. How may we serve you?" "Mrs. Ashworth," the Duke replied with formal courtesy. "I apologize for calling without prior notice, but I'm in the area on business and wish to discuss a matter that may be of mutual interest." "Of course, Your Grace. Please, come into the drawing room. Lily, make your curtsy to His Grace." Lily obeyed, offering the deep reverence due to a duke, but when she rose, she found herself studying Lord Blackwood's face. There was something familiar about his features, something that nagged at her memory. "I understand," the Duke continued as they settled in the drawing room, "that your late husband's estate may be available for purchase. I am interested in acquiring property in this area and thought we might discuss terms." Mrs. Ashworth's face lit up with hope and calculation. "Indeed, Your Grace, we have been considering various options for the estate. The property is quite valuable, with excellent farmland and a well-maintained house." As the adults discussed business, Lily found her attention drawn to Lord Blackwood, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. He seemed uncomfortable, almost agitated, and she noticed that he avoided meeting her eyes directly. "Lord Blackwood," she said during a lull in the conversation, "are you quite well? You seem distressed." He looked at her then, and she saw something in his dark eyes that made her pulse quicken with recognition. "I am quite well, Miss Ashworth, thank you for your concern." His voice. There was something about his voice that was achingly familiar, though she could not place where she might have heard it before. "Perhaps," the Duke said, "Lord Blackwood might take a tour of the grounds while we discuss the financial particulars. He has a keen interest in horticulture and would appreciate seeing your gardens." "Of course," Mrs. Ashworth agreed quickly. "Lily, why do you not show Lord Blackwood the gardens? You know them quite well." Lily rose, still puzzled by the strange sense of familiarity she felt when looking at their distinguished visitor. "I would be happy to, Your Grace." As they walked toward the garden, Lord Blackwood remained silent, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid with tension. Lily tried to make conversation, pointing out various features of the landscape, but he responded only with monosyllables. "The rose garden is particularly beautiful," she said as they approached the area where she had spent her morning walks. "Our gardener has done exceptional work with them." At the mention of the gardener, Lord Blackwood stopped walking entirely. "Your gardener?" he asked, his voice strained. "Yes, a man named James. He has been here only a short time, but his skill with the roses is remarkable." Lily looked around, hoping to spot the man in question. "I wonder where he might be. I should like you to meet him." "That will not be necessary," Lord Blackwood said quickly. I'm sure he is busy with his duties." They had reached the rose garden now, the same spot where Lily had spent such pleasant mornings in conversation with the mysterious James. As they stood among the flowers, Lord Blackwood seemed to relax slightly, his rigid posture softening as he took in the carefully tended beds. "Someone has indeed done beautiful work here," he said quietly, and there was something in his tone that made Lily look at him more closely. "You sound as if you speak from experience," she observed. "Do you garden yourself, Lord Blackwood?" I have some knowledge of horticulture," he replied carefully. "These roses have been pruned with exceptional skill. Whoever tends them clearly understands their needs." As he spoke, Lord Blackwood moved among the flowers with an easy familiarity that struck Lily as odd. Most gentlemen of his station would be careful not to soil their clothes or disturb their appearance, but he seemed unconsciously at home among the plants. "Lord Blackwood," she said slowly, a suspicion beginning to form in her mind, "have you visited Thornfield before? You seem familiar with the gardens." He froze, his back to her, and she could see the tension return to his shoulders. "I do not believe we have met before today, Miss Ashworth." But even as he said the words, Lily was studying the line of his shoulders, the way he held his head, the familiar grace of his movements. Memory crashed over her like a wave, and she gasped aloud. "James," she whispered. "At this moment, would you have told the truth?" Lord Blackwood, James, turned slowly to face her, and she could see the truth written in his expression, in the way his dark eyes held the same warmth and intelligence she had come to treasure in their morning conversations. "Miss Ashworth," he began, but she cut him off. "You are James," she said, her voice barely audible. "The gardener. You have been lying to me." The hurt in her voice cut through him like a blade. "Lily, please let me explain." "Explain what?" she demanded, her voice rising with emotion. "Explain how you have been deceiving me, how you have been playing some kind of game with my feelings?" "It was not a game," James said desperately. "Everything I said to you, everything I felt, that was real. The deception was only about my identity, not about my feelings." "Only about your identity?" Lily laughed bitterly. "Do you have any idea what that means? I have been pouring out my heart to a man who does not exist, sharing my thoughts and fears with someone who was laughing at my naivety." "I was never laughing at you," James said firmly. "If anything, I was marveling at your intelligence, your strength, your genuine nature. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met." "And yet you could not trust me with the truth," Lily said, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "You allowed me to believe you were a servant, someone I could speak to freely without the constraints of social position. You let me make a fool of myself." "You did not make a fool of yourself," James said, moving closer despite her obvious distress. "You were honest and open and beautiful in your authenticity. If anyone has been a fool, it is I, for thinking I could maintain this deception without consequence." "Why?" Lily asked, her voice breaking. "Why did you do this? Why did you pretend to be someone else?" James ran a hand through his hair, destroying the careful styling that marked him as a gentleman. "I came here to assess the estate for purchase. My father has been looking for property in this area, and Thornfield was recommended to us. I thought to spend a few days observing the land, the buildings, the general condition of the property." "As a spy," Lily said flatly. "As an investor," James corrected. "But when I arrived, when I saw how difficult your family's circumstances were, I could not bring myself to approach directly. I thought if I could observe quietly, I might find a way to help without causing embarrassment." "Help?" Lily's voice was sharp with disbelief. "By deceiving me, by allowing me to develop feelings for someone who does not exist." "By trying to understand the situation fully before acting," James said. "And yes, the feelings, those were unexpected. I never intended for that to happen." "But it did happen," Lily said quietly. "At least I thought it did. Now I do not know what was real and what was merely part of your performance." James stepped closer, his eyes intense with sincerity. My feelings for you are the most real thing in my life, Lily. Everything else, my title, my duties, my obligations, all of that feels like the performance. When I was with you in these gardens, when we talked and laughed and shared our thoughts, that was the first time I have felt truly myself in years. But you are not James the gardener, Lily said, wrapping her arms around herself as if to ward off a chill. You are Lord Blackwood, heir to a dukedom. You have responsibilities, expectations, a position in society that I could never share. Those things do not change who I am inside, James insisted. They do not change what I feel for you. Do they not? Lily challenged. Can you honestly tell me that Lord Blackwood would court the daughter of a country gentleman facing financial ruin? Would your father approve such a match? Would society accept it? James was silent, and his silence was answer enough. I thought not, Lily said, her voice hollow with disappointment. So you see, it does not matter what you feel or what I feel. The deception may have been about your identity, but the impossibility is about our circumstances. Lily, please. No, she said firmly, backing away from him. I need time to think, to understand what this means. I cannot look at you right now and see anything but lies. Everything I told you about my feelings was true, James called after her as she turned to walk away. My name may have been false, but my heart was not. Lily paused, but did not turn around. Your heart may have been true, Lord Blackwood, but your courage was not. If you had trusted me with the truth from the beginning, perhaps we might have found a way forward. As it stands, I do not know if I can trust anything you say. As she walked back toward the house, leaving James standing alone among the roses they had admired together, Lily felt as if her world had shifted on its axis. The man she had been falling in love with did not exist. In his place stood a lord whose position and prospects made any relationship between them impossible. But even as she told herself that it was better to know the truth, that she was fortunate to have discovered his deception before her feelings had grown deeper, she could not deny the ache in her chest. For a few precious mornings, she had felt alive in a way she never had before. She had experienced the joy of true companionship, of meeting a mind that matched her own, of feeling valued for herself rather than her connections or her dowry. Now she was back to reality, to Lord Pemberton's practical proposal, to her stepmother's financial pressures, to a future that stretched before her grey and loveless. The cruelest part was that James, Lord Blackwood, had shown her what she was missing. He had given her a taste of what love could be, only to snatch it away with the revelation of his true identity. As she entered the house and heard the continuing conversation between the Duke and her stepmother about the sale of their estate, Lily realized that her problems had just become infinitely more complicated. Not only had she lost the man she was beginning to love, but her family's future now lay in the hands of his father. The morning that had begun with such hope had become a nightmare of deception and impossible choices, and she had no idea how she would find the strength to face what came next. The drawing-room conversation had concluded by the time Lily returned to the house, her composure carefully restored despite the turmoil in her heart. The Duke of Ravenshollow was taking his leave, having apparently reached some preliminary agreement with her stepmother about the estate. "Ah, Miss Ashworth," the Duke said as she entered. "I trust Lord Blackwood found the gardens to his satisfaction." "Indeed, Your Grace," Lily replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "The gardens are quite illuminating." She caught the slight wince that crossed James's face at her choice of words, but he said nothing, merely bowed formally as his father prepared to depart. "We shall be in touch regarding the particulars, Mrs. Ashworth," the Duke continued. "I believe we can reach an arrangement that will be beneficial to all parties." After they left, Mrs. Ashworth turned to Lily with barely contained excitement. "Do you realize what this means? The Duke of Ravenshollow wishes to purchase our estate. The sum he mentioned would not only clear our debts, but provide a substantial dowry for your marriage to Lord Pemberton." Lily felt the walls closing in around her. "And what of our home? Where would we live?" The Duke has graciously offered to allow us to remain in the dower house for as long as we wish. It is a most generous arrangement." Mrs. Ashworth's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "This solves all our problems, Lily. You can marry Lord Pemberton with a proper dowry, and we shall have financial security." "How convenient," Lily said quietly, though her mind was racing. Why would the Duke make such a generous offer? What did he gain from allowing them to remain on the property? Her questions were answered the following morning, when a note arrived requesting her presence at Ravenshollow Castle for a private interview with His Grace. Mrs. Ashworth was beside herself with excitement at this mark of attention from such an exalted personage. "You must wear your best gown," she fussed as Lily prepared for the visit. "This could be the making of our family's fortune. Perhaps the Duke has heard of your accomplishments, your education. Perhaps he has a position in mind for you in his household." Lily doubted that the Duke's interest was quite so benevolent, but she said nothing. She had her own suspicions about the purpose of this interview, suspicions that proved correct when she was shown into the Duke's private study at Ravenshollow Castle. "Miss Ashworth," the Duke said, rising from behind an imposing mahogany desk, "thank you for accepting my invitation. Please be seated." The study was magnificent. Lined with leather-bound volumes, decorated with priceless artwork, furnished with pieces that spoke of centuries of wealth and power. It was also, Lily noted, designed to intimidate, to remind visitors of their place in the social hierarchy. "Your Grace," she said, settling into the chair he indicated, "I confess myself curious about the purpose of this meeting." "Direct," the Duke observed with approval. "I appreciate that quality in a woman. It saves considerable time." He moved to stand before the fireplace, his posture commanding. "I believe you have become acquainted with my son during his recent employment at your estate." So he knew. Lily felt her cheeks warm but kept her expression neutral. "I have had occasion to speak with Lord Blackwood, yes. And what did you think of him?" The question was unexpected in its simplicity. "I found him to be intelligent and well-spoken," Lily said carefully. "Did you indeed? And did you find him attractive? Charming, perhaps?" Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks at the Duke's bluntness. "Your Grace, I hardly think—" "Miss Ashworth," the Duke interrupted gently, "I am not here to embarrass you. I am here because my son has done something unprecedented in his 28 years of life." "Which is?" "He has fallen in love." The Duke's expression was unreadable. "Deeply, genuinely, and, according to him, irrevocably in love. With you." Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Lord Blackwood is very kind, but I fear he may have misunderstood the nature of our acquaintance." "Has he?" The Duke moved closer, his keen eyes studying her face. "Because he has informed me that he wishes to marry you, Miss Ashworth. He has asked for my permission to offer for your hand." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. "He? What?" "He wishes to marry you," the Duke repeated. "Despite the difference in your stations, despite the financial disparity, despite the fact that such a marriage would be considered highly irregular by society, he's prepared to defy convention, disappoint his family, and risk his position for the chance to make you his wife." Lily stared at him, her mind reeling. "And what was your response?" "I told him that the decision was not his alone to make," the Duke said calmly. "A marriage between my heir and a woman of your circumstances would have implications far beyond personal happiness. It would affect the duchy, our family's reputation, our political alliances." "I see," Lily said quietly. "And you have called me here to explain why such a marriage is impossible." "On the contrary," the Duke said, surprising her. "I have called you here to determine whether it is advisable." Lily blinked in confusion. "I beg your pardon." The Duke returned to his seat, leaning back with the air of a man accustomed to complex negotiations. "Miss Ashworth, I have spent considerable time investigating your family, your background, your character. What I have discovered has impressed me greatly." "In what way?" "You have managed your family's affairs with remarkable skill since your father's death, despite having no formal training in business matters. You have maintained the estate's productivity, negotiated with creditors, and preserved your family's dignity under extremely difficult circumstances." The Duke's tone was matter-of-fact. "These are not the accomplishments of an ordinary young woman." Lily felt a flush of pride, despite her confusion. "I did what was necessary." "Precisely. You did what was necessary without complaint or self-pity, without expecting others to solve your problems for you. That, Miss Ashworth, is the quality I most value in a potential duchess." "Duchess?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "My son will inherit the duchy someday. He will need a wife who can manage vast estates, navigate complex social situations, and represent our family with intelligence and dignity. Beauty and breeding are pleasant, but they are not essential. Character and capability are." Lily struggled to process what she was hearing. "Your Grace, are you saying that you would approve of a marriage between Lord Blackwood and myself?" "I am saying that I would consider it under certain conditions." "Which are?" The Duke leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "First, you must be certain of your feelings for my son. I will not have him marry a woman who accepts him merely for his title and fortune. He has been hurt enough by mercenary females seeking to advance their position. I can assure you that my feelings for James have nothing to do with his title," Lily said quietly. "Indeed, I was quite unaware of his true identity when those feelings developed." "Good. Second, you must be prepared for the challenges that such a marriage would bring. Society will not easily accept you. There will be whispers, snubs, attempts to undermine your position. You will need considerable strength to weather such storms." Lily thought of the years she had spent managing her family's crisis, of the strength she had found when she had no choice but to be strong. "I believe I can handle society's disapproval, Your Grace. And third," the Duke continued, "you must be willing to forgive my son for his deception. He acted foolishly, but his motives were not malicious. He was trying to protect you from the complications his true identity would bring. This was the most difficult condition, the one that touched on the hurt that still ached in her chest. He lied to me," she said simply. "Yes, he did, and he knows it was wrong. But Miss Ashworth, consider this. When he thought he was merely a gardener in your eyes, when he believed he had nothing to offer you but his conversation and his company, you still valued his presence. Does that not suggest that what you felt for him was based on his true character rather than his circumstances?" Lily was quiet for a long moment, considering the Duke's words. It was true that she had been drawn to James before she knew anything about his prospects or position. She had fallen in love with his mind, his kindness, his gentle humor, qualities that had nothing to do with his title. "I need to speak with him," she said finally. "I need to hear from his own lips what he intends, what he truly feels." "Of course," the Duke agreed. "He is waiting in the garden, in fact. He has been there since dawn, hoping you would agree to see him." Lily rose from her chair, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Your Grace, may I ask why you are willing to consider such an unconventional match? Surely there are many eligible young ladies who would be more suitable." The Duke smiled, and for the first time his expression was genuinely warm. "Miss Ashworth, I have watched my son fulfill his duties admirably for years, but I have never seen him truly happy. Yesterday, when he spoke of you, when he described the conversations you shared and the feelings you inspired in him, that was the first time I have seen him come alive. A man who is heir to a dukedom has many obligations, but surely happiness should not be sacrificed entirely to duty. And if I choose not to marry him, if I decide that the obstacles are too great, then you will have my respect for making an honest decision and my continued offer to purchase your estate on generous terms. Your family's security does not depend on your answer to my son's proposal." The assurance meant more to Lily than the Duke could know. To have a choice, a real choice, free from financial coercion, was a gift she had not expected. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said quietly. for your honesty, your generosity, and your understanding. Do not thank me yet, the Duke replied with a slight smile. Wait until you see what my son has done to my prize roses while waiting for you to arrive. As Lily made her way through the corridors of Ravenshollow Castle toward the gardens, her mind was spinning with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. A duke's son who loved her for herself. A future that offered not just security, but partnership, respect, and genuine affection. A chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of her family's misfortune. But first, she had to face James, Lord Blackwood, and determine whether the love she had felt for a gardener could survive the revelation that he was so much more than he had seemed. The garden at Ravenshollow was magnificent, far grander than anything at Thornfield, but Lily barely noticed the carefully planned vistas and exotic plantings. Her attention was focused entirely on the figure kneeling among the rose beds, a man in fine clothes who was nonetheless digging in the earth with his bare hands, his usually perfect appearance disheveled with worry and sleepless nights. "James," she said softly. He looked up at the sound of her voice, and she saw in his face all the hope and fear and desperate love that she felt in her own heart. "Lily," he breathed, rising to his feet, but not daring to approach her. "You came. Your father can be very persuasive," she said, trying to keep her tone light despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I asked him not to pressure you. I hoped you would come because you wanted to see me, not because you felt obligated." "I did want to see you," Lily admitted. "I needed to understand, to know what is real and what was merely performance." James took a step closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "Everything I felt for you was real, Lily. Every word I spoke about my feelings, every moment of happiness I found in your company, that was the truest thing in my life. But you lied about who you were. I lied about my name, my position, my circumstances. I never lied about my heart." James moved closer still, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I am asking anyway. I was a coward, Lily. I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you would see only the title and the fortune, not the man beneath." "And now?" Lily asked quietly. "What do you see when you look at me? A convenient solution to your need for a wife, a woman whose gratitude would ensure her compliance." "I see the woman I love," James said simply. "I see intelligence and strength and beauty that has nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with character. I see someone who made me feel more myself in a few conversations than I have felt in years of fulfilling my duties as a lord. Your father says you wish to marry me." "I do," James said without hesitation. "I want to marry you, to build a life with you, to face whatever challenges come our way together. I want to give you the choice you have never had, the choice to marry for love rather than duty." "And what of your duties? Your obligations to your family, your position?" James was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "I have spent my entire life doing what was expected of me, being who others needed me to be. For the first time, I want to choose something for myself. I want to choose you, Lily, if you will have me, even knowing that society will disapprove, that our marriage would be considered scandalous, especially knowing that," James said firmly. "I am tired of living my life according to other people's expectations. I want to live it according to my own heart." Lily looked at this man who had captured her heart while pretending to be someone else, who was now offering her everything she had ever dreamed of, and some things she had never dared to dream. The choice before her was clear, but it was also terrifying in its implications. "James," she said slowly, "if I marry you, I will not be a conventional duchess. I will not be content to sit quietly and manage your household while you make all the important decisions. I will want to be your partner in truth, to share in the responsibilities and challenges of your position." "I would expect nothing less," James replied, with a smile that transformed his entire face. "I fell in love with your mind as much as your heart, Lily. I want a wife who will challenge me, who will make me better than I am alone. And if I sometimes disagree with you, If I have opinions that conflict with yours, then we will discuss them like the intelligent adults we are, and we will find solutions together. James moved closer, close enough to take her hands in his. I do not want a wife who will simply agree with everything I say. I want a partner who will help me see the world more clearly. Lily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming gratitude for this unexpected chance at happiness. Then yes, she said softly, yes, James, I will marry you. I will be your wife, your partner, your duchess, if you truly want me. I have never wanted anything more, James said, and then he was kissing her, there among the roses in the garden where their love had first bloomed, and Lily felt as if her heart might burst with the joy of it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing with happiness, James took her hand and led her to a bench beneath an arbor heavy with climbing roses. There is something else I need to tell you, he said, his expression becoming more serious. About the estate, about my father's offer to purchase Thornfield. What about it? It was my idea, James admitted. When I realized how dire your family's financial situation was, I asked my father to make an offer that would ensure your security regardless of whether you accepted my proposal. I could not bear the thought of you being forced into marriage with Lord Pemberton simply because you had no other choice. Lily stared at him, understanding dawning. You were trying to give me freedom. I was trying to give you what every person deserves, the right to choose their own fate based on their own desires rather than financial necessity, even if that choice did not include you. Even then, James confirmed, I love you enough to want your happiness, even if it could not be with me. The simple honesty of his words, the selflessness they revealed, touched Lily more deeply than any declaration of passion could have. This was the man she had fallen in love with in the garden at dawn, not the lord with his title and fortune, but the person who saw her clearly and loved her completely. James, she said, framing his face with her hands, I choose you, not because of your title or your wealth or your father's generosity, but because you are the man who made me feel alive again, because you saw me as I truly am and loved me anyway. And I choose you, James replied, covering her hands with his own, because you are the woman who showed me what it means to be truly myself. Because with you, I am not just Lord Blackwood or the future Duke, I am simply James, and that is enough. As they sat together in the garden where their love had first taken root, planning a future that neither had dared to imagine just days before, Lily reflected on the strange turns that fate could take. She had thought herself trapped by circumstances, doomed to a loveless marriage or spinsterhood. Instead, she had found a love that transcended social barriers, a partnership that promised equality and respect, and a future bright with possibility. The sun was setting over Ravenshollow Castle, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that matched the flowers surrounding them. In a few hours, they would return to the world of society and its expectations. But for now, they were simply two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen love over convention. It was, Lily thought as James's arms tightened around her, the perfect ending to a story that had begun with deception but had bloomed into truth. The announcement of their engagement created exactly the sensation James had predicted. London society buzzed with speculation about the future Duke who had chosen to marry a country gentleman's daughter of modest fortune, while the newspapers delighted in the romantic story of love triumphing over social barriers. The Duke's gardener bride, read one particularly sensational headline, though the article beneath was surprisingly sympathetic to their romance. Society, it seemed, was more ready to embrace a love story than either of them had expected. I confess myself surprised by the generally favourable reception, James said, as they read the morning papers in the breakfast room at Ravenshollow Castle, where Lily was staying as a guest until their wedding. I had expected more criticism. Perhaps people are more romantic than we give them credit for, Lily replied, setting down the Times with a smile. Or perhaps they simply enjoy a story where love conquers all obstacles. Speaking of obstacles, James said, his expression becoming more serious. "There is one matter we must discuss before our wedding. Lord Pemberton has been vocal in his objections to our engagement." Lily felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of her former suitor. "What sort of objections?" "He has been spreading rumors that you are a fortune hunter who deliberately set out to ensnare me, that your supposed innocence is merely a calculated performance." James's voice was tight with controlled anger. "He has also suggested that I am not of sound mind, that I have been bewitched by a scheming woman who took advantage of my temporary lapse in judgment." "How charming of him," Lily said dryly, though she could feel her stomach knotting with anxiety. "And are people listening to these accusations?" "Some are," James admitted. "Pemberton has influence in certain circles, and there are always those who prefer scandal to romance. But my father has made it clear that anyone who questions my choice also questions his judgment, which has silenced most of the criticism." "Most, but not all." "No, not all." James reached across the table to take her hand. "Lily, I want you to be prepared for what we may face. There will be those who will never accept you, who will always see you as an interloper. Are you certain you are ready for that?" Lily considered his question seriously. She had spent months managing her family's crisis while facing whispers and speculation about their reduced circumstances. She had endured Lord Pemberton's condescending courtship and her stepmother's constant pressure to marry for money rather than affection. Surely she could handle whatever society chose to throw at her. "I am ready," she said firmly. "I have faced worse things than gossip, James, and I will not let Lord Pemberton's jealousy destroy our happiness." "Jealousy?" "Of course it is jealousy," Lily said with more confidence than she felt. "He expected me to accept his proposal gratefully, to be honored by his attention. Instead, I chose love over security, romance over practicality. It must be quite galling for a man of his pride." James smiled at her assessment, but his expression remained troubled. "There is something else. Pemberton has requested a private meeting with me. He claims he has information about your family that I should know before proceeding with the marriage." "What sort of information?" "He would not say, only that it concerns your father's business dealings and certain irregularities that came to light after his death." Lily felt her blood turn cold. She had worked so hard to keep her family's financial difficulties private, to maintain their dignity despite their reduced circumstances. If Pemberton had discovered something damaging about her father's affairs— "James," she said carefully, "whatever Pemberton thinks he knows, whatever accusations he plans to make, I want you to hear them from me first. You do not need to justify your family's circumstances to me," James said gently. "I know your father was an honorable man who faced unexpected difficulties." "It is more complicated than that," Lily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father, he made some poor investments in his final years. He trusted the wrong people, believed promises that proved false. When he died, we discovered that he had borrowed heavily against the estate, that he had used money that was not his to cover his losses." James was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Are you saying that your father embezzled funds?" "No, I am saying that he made desperate choices when faced with ruin," Lily said, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "He took money from trust funds he managed for other families, believing he could replace it before anyone discovered the shortfall. But his investments failed, and when he died suddenly, the truth came to light." "My God, Lily, why did you not tell me this before?" "Oh, because I was ashamed," she said simply, "because I knew that if the full extent of his debts became public knowledge, it would destroy not just our family's reputation, but yours as well. A future duke cannot marry the daughter of a man who died in disgrace." James rose from his chair and moved to kneel beside hers, taking her hands in his. "Lily, look at me. Your father's mistakes do not define you. His choices do not determine your worth." "Do they not?" Lily asked bitterly. "Society will say that dishonesty runs in my blood, that I am as untrustworthy as he was. They will say you have been deceived by a family of criminals. Then society will be wrong, James said firmly. I have seen your character, Lily. I have witnessed your integrity, your determination to do what is right even when it costs you dearly. You are not responsible for your father's failures, but I am responsible for concealing them from you, Lily said, pulling her hands free from his grasp. I have allowed you to believe that our only obstacle was the difference in our social positions, when in truth there are far more serious impediments to our marriage. James was quiet for a long moment, and Lily could see him working through the implications of what she had revealed. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful rather than accusatory. How much money was taken? Nearly £10,000, Lily whispered. Money that belonged to widows and orphans, people who trusted my father with their futures. And what have you done to address this debt? Everything I could. I sold my mother's jewelry, dismissed most of the servants, economized in every possible way. I've been making payments to the affected families, but it will take years to repay the full amount. Lily's voice broke slightly. That is why I was considering Lord Pemberton's proposal, despite my distaste for the man. His settlement would have provided enough to clear the debt entirely. And now? James asked quietly. Now I do not know what to do, Lily admitted. Your father's offer for the estate is generous, but it will not cover both my father's debts and provide for my family's future. I cannot ask you to assume responsibility for my father's crimes. James was silent for several minutes, staring into the fire that crackled in the breakfast room grate. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and decisive. The debt will be paid, he said simply. James, no, I cannot allow you to— You are not allowing me to do anything, he interrupted gently. I am choosing to do it. When we marry, your family's obligations become mine. That is what marriage means, sharing burdens as well as joys. But £10,000 is a significant sum, but not one that will cause hardship to my family, James said matter-of-factly. My father's estates generate more than that in a single year. The money itself is not the issue. Then what is? James rose and moved to the window, looking out over the gardens where they had first walked together. The issue is whether you trust me enough to share your burdens, whether you believe our partnership is strong enough to weather this storm. Of course I trust you, Lily said, rising to join him at the window. But James, you must understand what this means. If you pay my father's debts, if you marry me despite this scandal, society will say that you are either a fool or that I have some hold over you. Your reputation will suffer. My reputation will survive, James said confidently. And if it does not, then it was not worth preserving. Lily, do you remember what you told me about marriage, about hoping for affection and partnership? Yes. This is what partnership means. It means facing difficulties together, supporting each other through challenges, refusing to let external pressures destroy what we have built. James turned to face her, his expression intense with sincerity. I am not marrying you, despite your family's troubles, Lily. I am marrying you because of who you are. A woman strong enough to shoulder impossible burdens, honest enough to tell me the truth, even when it might cost you everything, brave enough to choose love over security. And if Lord Pemberton makes this information public, if he uses it to destroy our engagement, then we will face that challenge together, James said simply. But Lily, I think you underestimate both my father's influence and society's capacity for forgiveness. A romantic love story has a way of overshadowing old scandals, especially when the couple involved faces their difficulties with dignity and honesty. Before Lily could respond, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. The butler entered with a silver tray bearing a single letter. A message for Miss Ashworth, he announced. The gentleman insisted it was urgent. Lily took the letter with trembling fingers, recognizing Lord Pemberton's distinctive handwriting on the envelope. Inside, his message was brief and to the point. Miss Ashworth, I believe it is time we discussed your family's financial irregularities and their impact on your engagement to Lord Blackwood. I shall call upon you this afternoon at 3 o'clock to present certain documents that may be of interest to His Grace. I trust you will receive me privately, as the matters we must discuss are of a delicate nature. Your servant, Pemberton. He knows, Lily said, sinking into the nearest chair. He knows everything, and he is coming here to expose it all. James read the letter over her shoulder, his expression darkening with each word. The man is a blackmailer, he said grimly. He thinks to force you into marriage by threatening to destroy your reputation and mine. Can he do it? Can he actually prove what my father did? If he has the right documents, yes, Lily admitted miserably. My father kept detailed records of his transactions. If Pemberton has somehow obtained access to those records, then we will meet his accusations head-on, James said decisively. We will not allow him to manipulate us through fear and intimidation. James, you do not understand. If this becomes public knowledge, if the full extent of my father's embezzlement is revealed, it will not just affect me. It will destroy your family's reputation, your father's political influence, your own future prospects. I cannot allow that to happen, and I cannot allow you to sacrifice your happiness to protect me from consequences I am willing to accept, James replied firmly. Lily, we are stronger together than we are apart. Whatever Pemberton thinks he can do to us, we will face it united. But what if... James silenced her with a gentle kiss, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. No more what-ifs, he said softly. No more fears about what might happen. We will deal with whatever comes together. That is what love means, Lily, choosing each other again and again, no matter what obstacles arise. As they held each other in the morning light streaming through the breakfast-room windows, Lily felt a peace she had not known since her father's death. For months, she had carried the burden of his mistakes alone, had shouldered the responsibility for her family's future without support or guidance. Now, for the first time, she had a true partner. Someone who knew her worst secrets and loved her anyway. Someone who was willing to stand beside her no matter what storms might come. The afternoon would bring Lord Pemberton and his threats, but Lily was no longer afraid. She had found something worth fighting for, something worth defending against all the forces that would try to tear it down. She had found love, and she would not let it go without a fight. At precisely 3 o'clock, Lord Pemberton arrived at Ravenshollow Castle with the punctuality of a man confident in his mission. He was shown into the drawing-room where Lily and James waited, the Duke having insisted on being present for any discussion that might affect his son's future. "Your Grace, Lord Blackwood, Miss Ashworth," Pemberton said with a bow that was perfectly correct and utterly cold. "Thank you for receiving me. I believe you will find our conversation illuminating." "Lord Pemberton," the Duke replied with icy courtesy, "I understand you have concerns about my son's engagement. Perhaps you would care to state them plainly." "Indeed, I would," Pemberton said, producing a leather portfolio from his coat. "I have here documents that reveal the true nature of Miss Ashworth's family circumstances, documents that I believe will give you pause about proceeding with this unfortunate alliance." "What sort of documents?" James asked, though Lily could see from his expression that he was prepared for whatever revelations might come. "Financial records from the late Mr. Ashworth's estate," Pemberton said with obvious satisfaction. "Records that show a pattern of embezzlement, fraud, and financial malfeasance that resulted in the theft of nearly £10,000 from trust funds under his management." Indeed, he spread the papers across the table with the theatrical flair of a man who enjoyed his moment of triumph. "As you can see, Miss Ashworth's father was not the honourable gentleman he appeared to be, but rather a common thief who died before he could be brought to justice." The Duke examined the documents with the careful attention of a man accustomed to complex financial matters. "These appear to be authentic," he said finally. "Lord Pemberton, how did you come by these records?" "Through entirely legal means," Pemberton replied smoothly. "I have been investigating Miss Ashworth's family since she first refused my proposal. I felt it was my duty to ensure that any gentleman who might court her was fully informed of her circumstances." "How thoughtful of you," James said dryly. "And what do you hope to accomplish by revealing this information now?" "I hope to save you from a marriage that would bring nothing but scandal and disgrace to your family name," Pemberton replied. "Surely you can see that an alliance with the daughter of an embezzler would be ruinous to your reputation." "Can I indeed?" James rose from his chair, his posture radiating controlled anger. "And I suppose you have a solution to propose." "I do," Pemberton said, his eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. "Miss Ashworth should marry me, as was originally planned. I am willing to overlook her family's irregularities in exchange for her hand. It would be a charitable act on my part, really, saving her from the disgrace of spinsterhood while providing her with the protection of my name." "How generous," Lily said quietly, speaking for the first time since Pemberton's arrival. "And what makes you think I would accept such a proposal now, when I refused it before?" "Because now you understand the consequences of refusal," Pemberton replied coldly. "If you persist in this engagement to Lord Blackwood, I will make these documents public. Every newspaper in London will carry the story of your father's crimes and your family's disgrace. You will be ruined, and you will drag the Blackwood name down with you. And if I marry you, then these documents will remain private. Your family's reputation will be preserved, and you will have the security that marriage to me provides." Pemberton's smile was triumphant. "It is really quite simple, Miss Ashworth. You can choose scandal and ruin, or you can choose respectability and protection." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the full implications of Pemberton's ultimatum. Lily felt the weight of the choice before her. Her own happiness against the welfare of everyone she loved, her future against James's reputation, love against duty. But before she could speak, the Duke rose from his chair with the dignity of a man accustomed to command. "Lord Pemberton," he said quietly, "you have made a serious error in judgment." "Have I, Your Grace?" "You have assumed that my family would be destroyed by association with scandal, that we would abandon Miss Ashworth to protect our own interests." The Duke's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable threat. "You have also assumed that you are the only person in this room with access to damaging information." Pemberton's confident expression faltered slightly. "I am not certain I understand your meaning." "Allow me to clarify," the Duke said, moving to his own desk and withdrawing a thick folder. "I have here a complete dossier on your activities over the past 5 years, Lord Pemberton. Your gambling debts, your association with certain unsavory characters, your treatment of the women unfortunate enough to fall under your influence." The colour drained from Pemberton's face. "You have been investigating me?" "Thoroughly," the Duke confirmed. "Did you really think I would allow my son to be threatened by a man of your character without taking appropriate precautions? I know about the serving girl you dismissed without references after she refused your advances. I know about the debts you have hidden from your creditors. I know about the young woman who died under mysterious circumstances after breaking her engagement to you." "Those are lies," Pemberton said desperately, but his voice lacked conviction. "Are they? Then you will welcome the opportunity to defend yourself in court when I present this evidence to the proper authorities." The Duke's smile was cold as winter. "You see, Lord Pemberton, you are not the only one who can play the game of mutual destruction." "You would not dare." "I would dare anything to protect my family," the Duke said firmly, "including the young woman my son has chosen to marry. Miss Ashworth will become a member of this family, and we protect our own." Pemberton looked around the room, his gaze moving from the Duke's implacable expression to James's protective stance beside Lily's chair. "This is not over," he said finally. "Yes, it is," James said quietly. "It is over, Pemberton. You have overplayed your hand, and you have lost. I suggest you leave now, before my father decides to make good on his threats." As Pemberton gathered his papers and prepared to leave, he turned back to Lily with one final attempt at manipulation. "You will regret this choice, Miss Ashworth. When society turns against you, when the whispers follow you wherever you go, remember that I offered you an alternative." "I will remember," Lily said calmly, "that you offered me a cage disguised as protection. I prefer the risks of freedom to the certainty of captivity." After Pemberton left, the three of them sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just occurred. Finally, the Duke spoke. "Well," he said with dry humor, "that was invigorating. It has been some time since I had the opportunity to destroy a man's reputation before tea time." "Father," James said, "did you really have all that information about Pemberton?" "Every word of it," the Duke confirmed. "I began investigating him the moment I learned of his interest in Miss Ashworth. A man who pursues a woman with such persistence despite her obvious reluctance bears watching. And you would really have made it public?" "Without hesitation," the Duke said firmly. "No one threatens my family, James. No one." Lily felt tears of gratitude gathering in her eyes. "Your Grace, I do not know how to thank you." "You can thank me by making my son happy," the Duke interrupted gently. "You can thank me by being the Duchess I know you are capable of becoming, and you can thank me by never again believing that you must face your troubles alone." "The debt," Lily said quietly. "My father's embezzlement, it is all true. Every word Pemberton said about that was accurate. And it will be handled," the Duke said matter-of-factly. "The affected families will be compensated, the records will be sealed, and the matter will be closed. Your father made mistakes, Miss Ashworth, but they do not define you or your future." But the cost is negligible compared to my son's happiness," the Duke said firmly. "Money can be replaced, Miss Ashworth. Love cannot." As evening fell over Ravenshollow Castle, Lily found herself in the garden where she and James had first walked together as an engaged couple. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air with sweetness, and she marveled at how much had changed since that morning when she had feared their love would be destroyed by the revelations of her father's crimes. "Do you regret it?" James asked, joining her on the bench beneath the rose arbor. "Choosing love over security, romance over respectability?" Lily considered his question, thinking of the challenges that still lay ahead, the whispers that would follow them, the social obstacles they would have to overcome. "No," she said finally, "I do not regret it. For the first time in my life, I am choosing my own destiny rather than having it chosen for me. That is worth any price. Even if that price includes being married to a man who once deceived you about his identity." "Especially that," Lily said with a smile, "because that deception led me to fall in love with the man you truly are, not the title you carry. I fell in love with James the gardener, and I am marrying James the future Duke. They are the same person, and I love them both." James pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her as if he would never let her go. "I love you, Lily Ashworth, soon to be Blackwood. I love your courage, your honesty, your refusal to be diminished by circumstances beyond your control." "And I love you," Lily replied, "for seeing me clearly from the very beginning, for offering me partnership instead of protection, for choosing love over duty." As they sat together in the garden where their love had first bloomed, surrounded by roses and starlight and the promise of a future they would build together, Lily reflected on the strange paths that had led them to this moment. She had thought herself trapped by her father's mistakes, doomed to a loveless marriage or a life of genteel poverty. Instead, she had found a love that transcended social barriers, a partnership that promised equality and respect, and a family that would protect her as fiercely as she would protect them. Which choice would you have made? The gardens at Ravenshollow Castle were more beautiful than ever, tended with the loving care of a duchess who had never lost her appreciation for the simple pleasure of watching things grow. Lily knelt among the rose beds in the early morning light, her hands dark with earth, her simple dress practical rather than fashionable. "You are up early, Your Grace," came a familiar voice, and she looked up to see James approaching with 2 cups of tea and a smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "As are you, Your Grace," she replied, accepting the tea gratefully. "Though I suppose we are both creatures of habit by now." "The best habits," James agreed, settling beside her on the ground with a disregard for his fine clothes that would have scandalized his valet. "How are they progressing?" "Beautifully," Lily said, gesturing to the new rose bushes they had planted to commemorate their first wedding anniversary. "I think your grandmother would have approved of the additions to her garden." "I think she would have approved of you," James said softly. "A duchess who is not afraid to get her hands dirty, who cares more about beauty than appearances." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun rise over the estate that was now their shared home. The past year had brought challenges. Whispers about Lily's background, social snubs from certain quarters, the inevitable adjustments of marriage between 2 strong-willed individuals. But it had also brought joys neither had expected, the deep satisfaction of true partnership, the pleasure of building something beautiful together, the quiet happiness of being completely known and completely loved. "Any regrets?" James asked, echoing the question he had posed on their engagement night. "Only one," Lily said with a mischievous smile. "I regret that it took us so long to find each other. Think of all the mornings we could have spent in gardens together if you had been honest about your identity from the beginning." "Ah, but then you might have fallen in love with the Duke instead of the man," James pointed out, "and I would never have been certain of your true feelings." "True," Lily conceded. "Perhaps some deceptions are necessary to discover deeper truths." "Speaking of truths," James said, his voice taking on a note of excitement, "I have news that I think will please you." "What sort of news?" "The orphanage in the village, the one you have been supporting with the funds from your father's restitution, has received a substantial anonymous donation, enough to expand their facilities and provide education for twice as many children." Lily's eyes widened with delight. "That is wonderful news. Do you know who made the donation?" "I have my suspicions," James said with a knowing look. "A certain duke who believes that good deeds should be done quietly, without fanfare or recognition." "Your father," Lily said, warmth flooding her chest. "He continues to surprise me with his generosity. He continues to surprise me with how much he has come to love his daughter-in-law," James replied. "Though I suppose I should not be surprised. You have that effect on people, Lily. You make them want to be better than they are." "As do you," Lily said, leaning against his shoulder. "You made me believe that I deserved love, that I was worthy of partnership and respect. You gave me the courage to choose happiness over security. And what a choice it has been," James murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "The best choice either of us has ever made." As they rose to return to the house for breakfast, Lily caught sight of a figure in the distance, a young woman walking alone through the gardens, her posture suggesting the same kind of troubled contemplation that had once driven Lily to seek solace among the flowers. "Who is that?" she asked. "Miss Catherine Morrison," James replied. "She arrived yesterday with her aunt for a visit. I believe she is facing some difficulties with her family's expectations regarding marriage." Lily studied the young woman's dejected figure with sympathy. "Perhaps I should speak with her. Sometimes it helps to know that others have faced similar challenges and found their way through." "I think that is an excellent idea," James agreed. "You have become quite the advocate for young women seeking to choose their own destinies." "Have I? I suppose I have." Lily smiled at the thought. "It seems I have found my purpose as a duchess, helping others discover that they have choices, even when those choices seem impossible." "And what better purpose could there be?" James asked, taking her hand as they walked back toward the castle. "Using our position to help others find the same happiness we have found." As they approached the house, Lily reflected on how much her life had changed since that first morning when she had encountered a mysterious gardener among the roses. She had been searching for peace then, for a moment's respite from the pressures and expectations that seemed to define her existence. Instead, she had found love, partnership, and a purpose that gave meaning to every day. The Duchess of Ravenshollow was not the title she had been born to, but it was the one she had chosen, and she wore it with pride. She had learned that true nobility came not from bloodlines or inherited wealth, but from the choices one made, the love one shared, and the good one did in the world. "James," she said as they paused at the entrance to their home, "do you remember what you told me about roses? About how they respond to attention, how they flourish when they are truly seen and appreciated?" "I remember. I think the same is true of people," Lily said thoughtfully. "We all flourish when we are truly seen, when we are appreciated for who we are, rather than what others expect us to be." "Is that what I did for you?" James asked softly. "Saw you truly. You saw me," Lily confirmed, "and you loved what you saw. You gave me the greatest gift anyone can give another person, the gift of being known and accepted completely." "As you did for me," James replied. "You saw past the title and the expectations to the man beneath. You loved James the gardener, and in doing so, you freed James the Duke to be himself." As they entered Ravenshollow Castle together, hand in hand, Lily felt a deep contentment that had nothing to do with wealth or status and everything to do with love, freely given and joyfully received. She had found her place in the world, not as someone's daughter or someone's wife, but as herself, a woman who had chosen her own destiny and found it good. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility and promise. There would be challenges to face, duties to fulfill, lives to touch and change for the better. But they would face it all together, as partners in every sense of the word, as two people who had discovered that love was not just about finding the right person, but about choosing to be the right person for each other. In the garden where their love had first bloomed, the roses continued to grow, tended with care and flourishing in the light. Like their marriage, they were a testament to the power of nurturing, of patience, of believing that beautiful things could grow from the simplest beginnings. And in the early morning hours, when the world was quiet and the light was soft, the Duke and Duchess of Ravenshollow could still be found among the flowers, hands dirty with honest work, hearts full of honest love, living proof that the best things in life were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth choosing again and again, no matter what obstacles might arise. Their love story had begun with deception, but it had bloomed into truth. And like the roses they tended together, it would continue to flourish for all the seasons of their lives. If this tale of hidden identity, unexpected love, and the courage to choose happiness over convention touched your heart, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more enchanting historical romances. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have fallen for the mysterious gardener? Could you have forgiven such a deception when love was at stake? Your engagement helps us bring you more stories where true love conquers all obstacles. Thank you for joining us in the gardens of Ravenshollow, and until our next romantic tale unfolds, remember that sometimes the most beautiful flowers bloom in the most unexpected places.